Seriously, we apologize. We had no idea you guys were still around.
Yeah, next time maybe do a little research.
Neanderthal man.
They engineered us. They engineered us.
So I'm gonna look up the word Neanderthal on the etymology of words. And it says extinct hominid from German Neanderthal, Neander Valley. It says literally new man, Greek Neander. As a noun by 1915 as a type of big, brutish, stupid person from 1926, they were extinct by about 35,000 years ago. That they interbred with modern humans was long debated and denied. So basically they lied. But DNA analysis settled that question by 2013. They did. And this is true from all the mixture of the Negro strand, the Africans. That's why a lot of them do not have hair all around their bodies, because they have the Negro or the African genetics or gene in them. So they cannot be hairy all over.
What? I'm not cool. I did not know you were there.
Now I'm going to show you a couple of pictures from the Middle Ages or the medieval time period, where the so-called white man, also known as the wild man, they had a lot of battles with the blackamoors, or just basically the Negroes, because Moor just means black or Negro. Okay. So during that time period, the blacks were in a higher state of authority or in rulership. And that's what they have erased or scratched from history. And I'm going to talk about that later on in the video, why they erased it and what effects does it have on the so-called black man here in Americas, because of the slave narrative. But first, I'm going to look up the definition of a wild man. So I'm looking under the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and the definition for wild man is categorized as A, an uncivilized man, savage; B, a man of fierce and ungovernable character; C, a man holding radical political views; number 2, or less commonly, wild man of the woods, orangutan. Now we know from the pictures there are certain characteristics which they label certain diseases where humans have more hair over their body more than others. And that word is hirsutism, which is the excessive growth of hair of normal or abnormal distribution. So like in the movie Star Wars, you had Han Solo and you had Chewbacca. That would be a definition or excessive growth of hair or abnormal distribution. And during the medieval time period, the same thing is applied to the so-called white man or the Neanderthal. All right, another definition of wild man is wild man of the woods, a mythical figure that appears in the artwork and literature of medieval Europe, so the medieval ages, compared to classical mythology, the Roman god of the woodlands. Okay, defining characteristics of the figure is its wildness. From the 12th century, they were consistently depicting as being covered with hair. Images of wild man appearing in the carved and painted roof bosses where intersecting OG vaults meeting Canterbury Cathedral in positions where one is likely to encounter the vegetal green man. The image of the wild man survived to appear as supporters for the coat of arms, especially in Germany, well into the 16th century. Renaissance engravers in Germany and Italy were particularly fond of wild men, wild women, and wild families, with examples from Martin Schoger, who died in 1491, and Albert Durer, 1471 through 1528, among others. So right here we have another picture of the wild man or wild people in the late 14th century, Book of Hours. I'm just going to read a little paragraph from the book. A strange madness came upon him. He kept away and fled into the woods, unwilling that any should see his going. Into the forest he went, glad to lie hidden beneath the ash trees. He watched the wild creatures gazing on the pastures of the glades. Sometimes he would follow them, sometimes pass them in his course. He made use of the roots and plants and of the grasses, of fruits from trees, and of the blackberries in the thicket. He became a man of the woods, as if dedicated to the woods. So for a whole summer he stayed hidden in the woods, discovered by none, forgetful of himself and of his own, lurking like a wild thing. Some would say that would be Bigfoot or the Sasquatch, but basically just a white man who's gone out into the wilderness just to be one with nature. So, that's nothing new. So this is the second movie of the Planet of the Apes series, Beneath the Planet of the Apes. The first one with Charles Heston. But basically the directors know that the so-called white man, Neanderthal or wild man, where they came from the Caucasus Mountains. And they allude to this in the films. And I'm going to show two scenes where they're basically telling you where they came from. And now when they make the other three installments of the movie, now it's in reverse. The so-called black men are the ones that are in prison the most, are in impoverished conditions, in an oppressive state. They're telling you right here in an art form in these movies.
Before we learn to talk, learn the lesson of everything. Did any good ever come from all that talk around all those tables?
You see, our history is in these films, and so is theirs, but they had to put it in the art form, okay, and make you believe it's fiction. A lot of this stuff actually happened in a sense where it's reversed, just like when they extend the Planet of the Apes with the conquest. Now the imprisoned apes are the ones that are rebellious, the so-called black man, because all the segregation, the Jim Crows, and the mistreatment of the former slaves, of what we did to them and their ancestors, which we did a lot of erroneous and horrific things as well to them. That's history that they won't teach, in these schools. But you can get it from these movies if you look hard enough.
Is to let you know that there are people of color here in the Dominican Republic. I know what you see on TV, you see a lot, and then in the United States, you see a lot of many Dominican people, they saying that they're not of color and all that kind of thing. But the truth of the matter is it's not their fault. The reason that they say that is because it's not necessarily taught here. But you can see these guys, you see his color right here? You see his color, you see everybody, he's light skinned. You see my boy here, ¿de qué color tú eres?
Black.
Yeah, hey, so you see that he's saying that he's black. You can see him right here. ¿Qué color tú eres? Okay, see, everybody's negro. But he a light skinned, this my boy, he light skinned too. But everybody is still, they got color. You see my man Mellito? ¿Qué color tú eres?
Black.
Okay, see, hey, so everybody is black. Everybody knows they're black. This is my cousin right here, my name, Primo. Primo.
Chile, man.
What color you are? What color you?
Black. I'm a nigga.
Oh, you heard it. Hey, you heard what he said. So the point is that people out here, they know that they're black. What happened is that a long time ago, when this country's inception came, the people they were already here, the Taino Indians, okay, and then you had the African slaves here. To this island came about 700,000 African slaves. So in order for there to be the colors that you see. That's African descendants naturally. It's African blood, but it's also Indian blood here. What happened is many of the Taino Indians were ran out because they didn't want to be slaves to the Portuguese and the Spanish. And so what they did was they went off and they made subcultures with Africans. That's what they did in Puerto Rico as well. So that's the reason you see what you will see light-skinned people, or you will see even dark-skinned people with quote-unquote good hair. You see these guys with they're dark, but they have curly hair. But when have you seen an Indian tall like this guy and cut and strong like that? That's African roots, man. You know, a lot of these guys, you see my little dog here, you see him right here? These are African mixed with Indian people as well. The lighter people, naturally the lighter people are gonna be more European. Okay, but the purpose of this is to let you know that, hey man, there's black people down here too. You have black people everywhere. The African influence is everywhere. Some Dominicans in New York may identify, they may say that they're not black. And the reason that they're saying that they're not black is because of the stigma that's attached to black people. They don't want to be attached to that. So what they're saying is they're Dominican. So naturally they are Dominican, but black is a color, it's not a nationality. But black is a color, it's not a nationality. But black is a color, it's not a nationality.
And that makes perfect sense, because black is not a nationality, it's just a color. Just like white's a color. Those are not a specific marker to identify a certain people. You can't identify your existence based on your skin tone. It doesn't make any sense. Okay? And it's funny how we can accept so-called white folks or white people as Indians, Jews, and all these other ancient cultures, but black is just take away to be. It's lacking identity.
Black is a color, just like white is a color. Black is a color, just like white is a color. Black is a color, just like white is a color. Dominican is a nationality, but black is the actual color. So that's the distinction that we got to understand. That.
All right, so I have this book. It's Their Time Has Come, to tell the truth. I mean, it's 2020, right? Neanderthal, John Darton. Okay, real good book. As you can see, the Neanderthals, these are not the Africans or the Negroes. Okay. Now, what I thought was real interesting about this book, the beginning of it, right here. And the Most High said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people. Genesis 25 and 23. So Jacob and Esau, okay? I'm just going by what this book is stating. I know there's different opinions who Esau is. Some people think it's the Arabs. Some people think it's, Esau's, it's the black man. Or some believe it's the so-called white man. Just many different conclusions, okay? Also, Beijing, June 9th, Chinese scientists are hot on the trail of a mysterious hairy wild man, and have found indirect evidence that might prove the reclusive human-like creature is no myth. Xinyu News Agency said on Friday, Reuters, 1995. And of course, this is a long book, a lot of chapters, but I just wanted to read a few paragraphs from different parts, about the wild man, the Neanderthal. November 8th, a 24-year-old woman from Surrey, England, who was part of an upward and outward group climbing Mount Aska, was found dead last week. After being missing for 4 days, her body was located on a ledge about 2 miles from the summit. The instructor, Robert Brody from London, said the group had been worried about the woman, Katrina Bryan, after she apparently walked away from the campsite. He said the party launched a wide search, but she was not found until they gave up and started their descent. The group had been hiking and climbing for 3 weeks in the region, which is rarely visited by outsiders. Locals tell stories of mountain men that prey on people who venture there. So that mountain man is the Neanderthal, the descendants, or the wild man, like in the medieval ages with the Moors. Mr. Brody said the group had been frightened by several mysterious apparitions, but he refused to go into detail. All right. Okay, this one paragraph right here. And so we came to the main event. The year is 1856, August. It's 3 years before Darwin will publish on the origin of species. And we know Darwin created this BS called, the Darwin's theory, from the ape evolving into the so-called white man.
You realize that the original Planet of the Apes came out on April 3rd, 1968? Now, we both know what happened the next day.
Martin Luther King was killed.
Or the wild man. And we know that Planet of the Apes, they take shots at the so-called blacks of nobility because they ruled in the old world, but the ape really represents the so-called black man. They came from us with the admixture of the Negro strand or African strand.
Using genetic methods, how long ago Neanderthals and humans were a single species, where the common ancestor was. They've also been able to compare human genomes and ask the question of whether there's any evidence of Neanderthal genes in the human genome. And they found that there is. And the amount is quite significant, upwards of 5 to 7%. Neanderthals used to live in the Neander Valley. You could have called it the Cayuga Lake Basin, but that's where they lived. And out of Africa came the modern humans, and the word the geneticist uses admixed. They admixed with the Neanderthals. They admixed with the Neanderthals.
With the Neanderthal. Okay. Let's see. 2 centuries later, in 1856, on a quiet day, a quarry worker discovered a cave.
And they all used to live in caves in those days like this.
Which had scores and scores of bones in it, piled up around the edges and scattered about, but mostly heaped in a mound near the center. The workers threw them away, all but a handful. For some reason, the owner of the land, one Felix Becker Schnauf, took an interest in these old bones and managed to salvage a few arms and thighs, parts of a pelvis, a fractured of skull. Okay, so basically he just found these different parts of a human skeleton. All right. Let me see. Furot brought in a anatomist from Bonn, Professor Schaffhausen. He became the first to theorize that the specimen was something truly unimaginable, not an ape, not a man, but some type of pre-man, perhaps an ancient being who roamed Europe long before the Romans and Celts. No, we know that's a lie because he's just theorizing. We know that the Grimdi, which is the Negro, the skeletons were found first in Europe. Okay, just because you theorize don't mean it's fact. And that's the problem over here with the artistic license.
You are not worthy to receive these 10 commandments.
The narratives that they theorize it and they publish it, and they publish books and they put it in these schools, and people are like just taught to believe all these theories, which there's no facts to prove it. Okay. Then the professionals got involved. The theory of evolution was in its infancy, and that's the problem. Theory of evolution, which is a lie. They come from us and the Neanderthals, the admixture. That's why you got all these different so-called races, which is a seed line. so-called black man, the Negro, the African, whatever you want to call him, is the original indigenous man of this whole earth. That's why our skeletons, bones are found everywhere. Okay. Let me see. The most prominent scientists sidestepped the controversy. Certainly Darwin did. Susan shook her head slightly. But we shouldn't be too judgmental. Remember, it was the age of dark superstition, pseudo-religion, straitjacket, conservatism. It was an enigma to imagine a human with an ape-like ancestor, not to mention a flat-headed cousin who looked as if he had been run over by a truck. Okay? And now, folks, here it is. There was a touch of the carnival barker in her pitch as she raised her fist high over her head and punched a button with her thumb, the star of the show, the Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, if I'm pronouncing that right, colloquially known to you all as the Neanderthal man.
Scientists have found that most of us still have a little bit of a Neanderthal inside us. A study into the DNA of the human subspecies found that they interbred with modern humans tens of thousands of years ago, and their genetic mark remains today.
The wild man, aka the white man.
Homo sapien is modern day human. Now, whilst white people, they're not actually 100% Homo sapien. They have anywhere between 2 to 9% Neanderthal DNA. So this white guy got really offended by my statement. But this statement is in not any way false or meant to offend. It's just simply based on me being a stickler for facts and knowledge. The statement was based on the new evidence and research from white anthropologists. So if you're going to get mad at me for stating facts, you then have to go and get mad at all these scientists and anthropologists too. Because there's this little new evidence from anthropologists that some people seem to be oblivious to, that Caucasians or white people have anywhere between 2 to 9% Neanderthal DNA. This is now the school of thought that all anthropologists are sticking to based on genetic studies. You know how it goes. Studies and research changes all the time, but this is what they're sticking to now, and they've been sticking to it for the last couple of years.
The hall darkened as the giant figure usurped it. It was immense, hirsute, which means hairy all over, like the wild man, and ran from one end of the screen to the other. There was the too large visage, so oddly familiar with hundreds of sketches and half-remembered dreams, the crooked, sloping brow, the bulging cage of the forehead, horribly ribbed, the prominent, slightly hooked nose, and weak, rounded chin. It was unspeakably misshapen, ugly, close enough to a human head to be recognizable, and thus rendered the difference even more grotesque. It was as if a giant hand had taken a waxen head and pulled it forward brutally, elongating it. The Neanderthal dwarfed Susan as she walked across the stage in front of its hairy chest, obviously to the gigantic form looming behind her. The contrast gave it the aspect of menace, King Kong peering in the window at Fay Ray. So basically, the Neanderthal man and the Neanderthal woman were both hairy, like the Moors depicted in that tapestry when they was fighting off the so-called white man or the wild man. Okay, so they know where they come from. That's why they put it in these movies, like Harry and the Hendersons, Planet of the Apes. You know, they'll give you subliminal and they'll give you satire because they know where they come from. They come from Neanderthal and they come from us with that mixture of the DNA.
A human is also known as a Homo sapien. Based on newfound studies, Caucasians are in fact only part Homo sapien. The Homo sapien was in fact black in skin color, while Neanderthal was white. What anthropology state happened is Homo sapiens discovered Neanderthals in the Caucasus Mountains when they branched out of Africa. These two separate species copulated and created what is known as the modern-day Caucasian. For those of you that don't know what copulated means, it means they had sex, all right? This is why you may have heard some brothers and sisters refer to white people as a mutation of black people or coming from black people. They're not talking about evolution. They're not saying one day black people evolved into white people. No. They're saying Homo sapiens mated with Neanderthals, and the offspring was this hybrid of the two, and as time has gone on, the Neanderthal DNA has diluted a little. But it's the Neanderthal DNA that gives white people their straight thin hair, their lack of melanin, and so forth. Light-skinned Neanderthals shared physical resemblances to modern white people. So according to the latest DNA researchers, these early Neanderthals had white skin, blue eyes, green eyes, red and blonde recessive hair. Therefore, modern Caucasians look more like their Neanderthal ancestors than they presently do to modern Africans. Even their bone structure is more similar to Neanderthals than modern-day Africans. Neanderthals are scientifically classed as non-human. Caucasians share more physical traits with Neanderthals than they do to Africans or even the Homo sapiens. The more that we learn about DNA, the more clearer the white race's connection to the Neanderthal becomes.
Not cool. I did not know you were there.
The Africans who came out from Africa have no evidence of any Neanderthal genes in them. No evidence of that mixture. So they're the real pure humans. Homo sapiens. Really, really interesting, and it gives you a lot to think about.
Research has proven that African people have no Neanderthal DNA, but Europeans and Asians do. Now, please don't get albinoism confused, okay? African albinos do not have Neanderthal DNA. They are not the same as white people. They are black. They are Negroid, but they have a melanin deficiency, which makes them lose their color in their hair, eyes, skin, which also gives them some medical conditions. And you can find all of this information and more in so much more depth online.